Dennis Cole pushed his cleaning cart down the empty hallway, the wheels squeaking softly against the polished floor. The corporate building was silent at midnight just the way he liked it. No people rushing past, no phones ringing, no one treating him like he was invisible, just Dennis and his work. He had been a janitor for 23 years. Some people thought it was a sad job, but Dennis found peace in it. Every night he made things clean and orderly. Every morning people came to work in a building that looked perfect. They never knew who made it that way, and that was fine with him. Dennis stopped at the back door and checked his watch. Midnight exactly. Time for his break. He stepped into the alley behind the building, letting the cool night air wash over his face. Earth had joined the galactic community 3 years ago, and sometimes Dennis still could not believe aliens were real. He had seen a few in the city, tall beings with strange skin colors and too many arms. They made him nervous, if he was honest. Something moved near the trash bins. Dennis turned his flashlight toward the sound. Probably a cat or a rat. The beam caught something that made him freeze. Scales. Dark gray scales that caught the light like metal. The creature was small, about the size of a house cat, but Dennis recognized it immediately. He had seen pictures on the news. A dragon. His heart hammered in his chest. Dragons were dangerous. Everyone knew that. The galactic authorities had warned humans to stay away from them. Dragons held grudges for generations. They had destroyed entire civilizations. 3 whole species had been wiped out after they angered dragon clans. The creature made a small, pained sound. Dennis took a step closer, his flashlight shaking in his hand. The dragon hatchling was lying on its side, blood matting its scales. Deep cuts ran along its back and parts of its body looked burned. Its breathing came in quick, shallow gasps. It was dying. Dennis knew he should walk away. Call the authorities, maybe, let them handle it. This was not his problem. Getting involved with dragons was asking for trouble. But the creature made that sound again, weak and frightened, and Dennis thought about the dog he had found when he was 10 years old. His father had said to leave it, that it was too hurt to save. Dennis had begged until his father gave in. The dog had lived another 12 years. He could not just leave something to die alone. Dennis went back inside and grabbed his jacket from the maintenance room. He returned to the alley and carefully wrapped the jacket around the hatchling. The creature was warm, much warmer than he expected. Its eyes opened briefly, just slits of bright copper color before closing again. Back in the maintenance room, Dennis cleared off his work table. He laid the hatchling down gently and went to get his first aid kit. His hands were steady now, focused on the task. He had to clean the wounds first. Warm water and clean cloths. Dennis worked slowly, talking softly as he cleaned away the blood. The burns looked bad, like someone had hit the creature with energy weapons. The cuts were deep but clean. What had happened to this little thing? The hatchling whimpered when Dennis touched a particularly bad burn, and he paused. I know it hurts. I'm sorry. Just trying to help you. He used antibiotic cream on the cuts, not knowing if it would work on alien biology but figuring it could not hurt. He wrapped the worst wounds with bandages. The hatchling's breathing was still shallow, but it seemed a bit steadier now. Dennis pulled up a chair and sat down. His shift was supposed to end at 6 in the morning, but he was not leaving. He kept a damp cloth nearby, and every few minutes he dripped water onto the hatchling's mouth. Sometimes its tongue flicked out weakly to catch the drops. The hours passed slowly. Dennis found himself talking to the creature, the way he used to talk to his dog. He told it about his job, about how his wife had left him 5 years ago, how his kids were grown and barely called anymore. He told it about the empty apartment he went home to every day and how he had started working extra shifts just to avoid the silence. You're going to be okay, he said, not knowing if it was true. You're not alone. As dawn light started filtering through the small window, the hatchling's breathing became easier. Its eyes opened again, those bright copper eyes, and they focused on Dennis's face. There was intelligence there, real awareness. The creature made a sound, not pained this time, but softer, almost like a purr. Dennis smiled. There you are. His phone buzzed. His supervisor was calling, probably wondering why the floors had not been cleaned. Dennis looked at the hatchling, then at his phone. He had not called in sick in 8 years. He had perfect attendance, never missed a day. He turned off his phone. The hatchling needed him more than the floors did. Just for today, someone else could push the cleaning cart. Dennis settled back in his chair, one hand resting gently near the creature's head. For the first time in years, he felt like what he was doing actually mattered. The world outside was waking up, but in this small maintenance room, a janitor kept watch over a dying dragon, and neither of them was alone anymore. The hatchling was surprisingly heavy for something so small. Dennis carried it wrapped in his jacket through the back streets, avoiding the main roads where early morning workers might see. His apartment was only 6 blocks away. He had walked this route for years, but today every shadow made him nervous. Inside his small one-bedroom apartment, Dennis laid the creature on his bed. The place was neat but bare. A couch, a television, a kitchen table with one chair. Not much for a man who had lived here alone for 5 years. He pulled the blinds closed and turned on the bedside lamp. The hatchling looked worse in the better light. The gray scales were dull, like metal that had not been polished. The wounds were angry and red around the edges. Dennis changed the bandages, using up most of his first aid supplies. He would need to get more, but first food. Dragons were predators, he knew that much. They ate meat. Dennis checked his freezer. Some chicken, a couple of steaks he had been saving. He thawed a piece of chicken in the microwave and cut it into small pieces. The hatchling did not want to eat it first. Dennis had to hold tiny pieces near its mouth, waiting patiently. Finally, the creature's tongue flicked out and took the meat, then another piece, and another. By the end, it had eaten half the chicken breast. Dennis called his work. He told them he had the flu and would not be in. The lie felt strange in his mouth. He never lied. But when he looked at the hatchling, now sleeping more peacefully on his bed, he knew it was the right choice. The first day was the hardest. The hatchling barely moved. Dennis checked every hour to make sure it was still breathing. He kept offering water, small pieces of meat. He changed the bandages 3 times. By evening, he was exhausted but could not sleep. What if the creature stopped breathing in the night? He pulled his chair next to the bed and dozed off sitting up, waking every time the hatchling made a sound. The second day was better. The hatchling lifted its head when Dennis entered the room. Those copper eyes tracked his movements. When he offered food, it ate more eagerly. The scales around its wounds looked less inflamed. Dennis ran out of chicken. He needed to go to the store, but he could not leave the creature alone. What if something happened? Finally, desperation drove him out. He went to the exotic pet store 3 blocks away, the one that had opened after Earth joined the galactic community. They sold food for alien pets. The owner, a tired-looking woman named Ruth, did not ask questions when Dennis bought 3 pounds of raw meat and some nutritional supplements. "For a friend's pet," Dennis said. Ruth just nodded and took his money. He used almost all the cash he had been saving for a new winter coat. By the 3rd day, the change was remarkable. The hatchling could sit up. It watched Dennis with clear, intelligent eyes as he moved around the apartment. When he talked, the creature's head tilted like it was trying to understand. The dull gray scales were starting to show hints of color underneath. Copper like its eyes, Dennis found himself talking to it constantly. He told stories about his childhood, about his marriage, about the daughter who lived across the country and never visited. The hatchling listened to every word. On the 4th morning, Dennis woke with a stiff neck from sleeping in the chair. Sunlight was streaming through a gap in the blinds. He blinked and looked at the bed. It was empty. Panic seized him. Dennis jumped up, searching the small apartment. The bathroom, the kitchen, the closet. No dragon. The bedroom window was open. He never opened that window. On his pillow, where the hatchling's head had rested, lay a single scale. It was the size of a quarter, copper-colored and warm to the touch. Dennis picked it up carefully. The scale caught the light beautifully, seeming to glow from within. The creature was gone. Dennis sat on the edge of his bed, the scale in his palm. He should feel relieved. Dragons were dangerous. Keeping one in his apartment had been insane. But instead he felt hollow. The apartment was too quiet again, too empty. His phone rang. Work. They wanted to know when he was coming back. Dennis looked around his apartment at the bloody bandages in the trash, at the empty plate that had held the hatchling's breakfast, at the scale in his hand. "Tomorrow," he said. "I'll be there tomorrow." That night, Dennis could not sleep in his bed. It felt wrong somehow. He slept on the couch instead, the copper scale on the coffee table where he could see it. He told himself the hatchling was fine. It had flown away, which meant it was healed enough. That was good. That was what he wanted. But he kept thinking about those intelligent copper eyes, the way the creature had listened when he talked, the soft purring sound it made when he cleaned its wounds gently. For 4 days, Dennis had not been alone. He had been needed. Now he was just a janitor again, in an empty apartment with nothing but a scale to prove it had been real. Dennis picked up the scale and held it up to the light. It was beautiful, like captured fire. He would keep it. Maybe on the days when the silence got too heavy, he could look at it and remember that once, for just a few days, he had made a difference. He set the scale back down and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow he would go back to work. Back to the empty hallways and the squeaking cart. Back to being invisible. But tonight, just for tonight, he let himself miss the small dragon that had made his apartment feel like a home. The floors gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Dennis pushed his cart forward and began mopping the lobby for the second time. His supervisor had commented yesterday that the building had never looked better. Dennis just nodded and kept working. What else was he going to do with his time? 3 weeks had passed since the hatchling disappeared. Dennis had fallen back into his routine. Work, sleep, work again. But something had changed inside him. The silence did not feel comfortable anymore. It felt wrong. He found himself going to the alley during his breaks, looking at the spot where he had found the creature. Nothing was ever there, just trash bins and shadows. He did not know what he expected. The dragon was gone. It was healthy now, probably back with its family wherever dragons came from. That was good. So why did his chest ache when he thought about it? On Saturday, Dennis did something he had never done before. He went to the animal shelter downtown. The building smelled like disinfectant and fur. Dogs barked from kennels in the back. A young volunteer showed him around. "Looking to adopt?" she asked hopefully. Dennis shook his head. "Just want to help. Do you need volunteers?" Her face lit up. Always. So Dennis started spending his Saturdays at the shelter. He cleaned kennels, walked dogs, sat with the cats that were too scared to come out of their hiding spots. The staff loved him. He was quiet and patient, and the animals responded to him. One old dog, a gray-muzzled mutt with arthritis, became his favorite. The dog had been at the shelter for 2 years. Nobody wanted an old dog. Dennis spent hours with him. Talking softly while he brushed the matted fur, the dog leaned into his touch and closed his eyes. "I know how you feel," Dennis told him. "Being alone is hard." Work continued as normal. Dennis cleaned the corporate building 6 nights a week. His supervisor gave him a small raise, saying he had really stepped up his game. Dennis put the extra money in a jar in his kitchen. He was not sure what he was saving for. Maybe a better apartment. Maybe a dog once he could afford one. But something was off. Dennis felt it on Tuesday night, about 3 weeks after the hatchling left. He was emptying trash cans on the 5th floor when the hair on the back of his neck stood up. Someone was watching him. He turned around. The hallway was empty. But the feeling did not go away. It happened again on Thursday. Dennis was in the alley during his break and he saw movement in the sky. Something large circling overhead. But when he looked directly at it, there was nothing there. Just stars and clouds. Friday night, the feeling was stronger. Dennis mopped the lobby, but his eyes kept drifting to the windows. Shadows moved outside, too deliberate to be trees swaying. Shapes that were almost but not quite birds. He was not imagining it. Something was out there. Saturday, on his way home from the shelter, Dennis took a different route. He wanted to see if the feeling followed him. It did. Several times he spun around, convinced someone was behind him. The street was always empty. But he caught glimpses. A figure ducking into an alley. A shadow on a rooftop that moved against the wind. His daughter called that night. She needed money for her car repair. Dennis said yes automatically, like he always did. She thanked him quickly and hung up. The conversation lasted 90 seconds. Dennis sat on his couch, phone in hand, and realized he could not remember the last time they had talked about anything real. She called when she needed money. He sent it. That was their relationship now. The copper scale sat on his coffee table. Dennis picked it up, feeling its warmth. The hatchling had needed him. Really needed him. Not for money or favors, but for care. For someone to sit with it in the dark and say, "You're not alone." When was the last time someone had needed him like that? Sunday evening, Dennis walked home from the grocery store as the sun set. His arms were full of bags. He had bought too much, like always, food that would go bad before he could eat it all. But buying for one person was hard. He could never get the portions right. The street was busy with people heading home from their weekends. Families, couples, groups of friends. Dennis walked alone, invisible as always in his plain jacket and worn jeans. Then someone stepped out of the crowd directly in front of him. Dennis stopped. The figure was tall, maybe 7 feet, wearing a hooded cloak that covered their face and body. But Dennis could see scaled hands, copper-colored in the fading light. His heart started pounding. The figure stood there for a long moment. People flowed around them like water around a stone, not seeming to notice anything unusual. The figure leaned forward slightly, and Dennis caught a glimpse of a face under the hood. Not human. Sharp features, copper eyes that glowed faintly. The figure spoke. The voice was strange, musical, and rough at the same time, like metal strings being played. It spoke one word, but Dennis did not understand the language. It sounded like singing and growling mixed together. Then the figure reached out one clawed hand and touched Dennis's chest, right over his heart. The touch was gentle, careful. The figure spoke again, the same word. Then it turned and walked away, disappearing into the evening crowd before Dennis could react. Dennis stood frozen, his grocery bags hanging from his arms. His chest tingled where the figure had touched him. Around him, people kept walking, completely unaware that anything unusual had happened. That night, Dennis could not sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the encounter over and over. The copper-colored hands, the glowing eyes, the careful, gentle touch. Dragons. He was being watched by dragons. The question was why. And what were they waiting for? Dennis woke to sirens. Not just one or two, but dozens of them, wailing across the city like the world was ending. He stumbled out of bed and turned on the television. Every channel showed the same thing. Ships. Massive ships in the sky above the city. Not human ships. The news anchors were trying to stay calm, but failing. Their voices shook as they described what everyone could see. Dragon vessels more than anyone had ever seen in one place. 30, 40, maybe 50 of them, hanging in the air like dark clouds. Dennis went to his window and looked up. Even from here he could see them, black shapes against the morning sky, each one large enough to block out the sun. He pressed his hand to the glass and felt his apartment vibrate slightly. The ships were doing something to the air itself, making it hum. His phone started buzzing with emergency alerts. Evacuate immediately. This is not a drill. Seek shelter. Stay away from windows. The messages kept coming one after another. Military jets screamed overhead. Dennis watched them circle the dragon ships like gnats around elephants. They looked so small, so helpless. On the television, a general was holding a press conference. He was saying something about defensive positions and trying to negotiate, but Dennis could see the fear in his eyes. Everyone was terrified. This looked like an invasion. Dennis turned off the television. He should be scared too. Maybe he should evacuate like they were telling everyone to do. But instead he felt strangely calm. He got dressed in his work clothes, the same uniform he wore every night. If the world was ending, he might as well be comfortable. Outside, the streets were chaos. People running to their cars, parents carrying children, police trying to direct traffic that was not moving. Dennis walked against the flow, heading toward his building. People shouted at him, told him he was going the wrong way. He kept walking. The corporate building was empty when he arrived. Everyone had left. Good. Dennis unlocked the door with his key and went inside. The lobby was dark and quiet. He turned on the lights and started his routine. If dragons were going to attack, they would do it whether he was here or not. Might as well keep the floors clean. He was mopping near the front windows when the first shuttle came down. It descended slowly, deliberately, landing in the plaza outside the building. The shuttle was the size of a bus, black metal covered in designs that hurt to look at directly. As it touched down, the concrete beneath it cracked from the weight. Dennis set down his mop and walked to the window. He should hide. He should run. Instead, he watched. The shuttle door opened with a hiss of air. Steam poured out and then they emerged. Dragons. Real adult dragons, not a tiny injured hatchling. They were massive, each one standing at least 12 feet tall on 2 powerful legs. Their scales caught the morning light like metal. Silver, copper, gold, bronze. They moved with a grace that seemed impossible for creatures so large. Military vehicles surrounded the plaza. Guns pointed at the dragons. Nobody fired. What good would guns do against beings that survived in the vacuum of space? The largest dragon, An ancient-looking creature with silver-copper scales stepped forward. It wore something around its neck, a metal device that glowed softly. When it spoke, the device translated its words into English, broadcasting through speakers that carried across the plaza. "We seek the human Dennis Cole." Dennis felt his heart stop. They were here for him. He looked around the empty lobby. He could hide. He could pretend he was not here. But what would be the point? They had tracked him down. Running would only delay the inevitable. He walked to the front door and pushed it open. The morning air was cold on his face. Every gun turned toward him as he stepped outside. A police officer shouted at him to get back, but Dennis ignored him. He walked across the plaza in his janitor uniform, his footsteps echoing in the terrible silence. The dragons watched him approach. Dennis could feel the weight of their eyes, ancient and knowing. He stopped about 10 feet away from the largest dragon, close enough to see the individual scales on its massive body, to feel the heat radiating from its skin. The dragon looked down at him. Its eyes were copper flecked with silver. They reminded Dennis of the hatchling's eyes, but older. So much older. Then the dragon lowered its enormous head in a bow. Around the plaza, humans gasped. Military personnel looked at each other in confusion. Dragons did not bow. Dragons destroyed. Dragons held grudges. They certainly did not bow to human janitors, but this one did. And then the other dragons did the same, all of them lowering their heads in a gesture of respect that made Dennis's throat tighten. The large dragon spoke again, its translated voice filling the air. "I am Grandmother Ashscale, matriarch of the Copper Fire clan. 4 weeks ago, my great-grandson was dying in your city. You found him?" Dennis nodded slowly. He did not trust his voice to work. "You had every reason to leave him," Grandmother Ashscale continued. "Your people have been warned about us. They fear us, as many species do. You knew that helping one of us could bring danger. Yet you stayed with him. You cared for him when no one else would." The dragon's massive head lifted and those ancient eyes fixed on Dennis with an intensity that made him feel like she could see through him. "You gave him your jacket when he was cold. You cleaned his wounds when he was hurt. You stayed awake through the night to make sure he kept breathing. And when he was afraid, you told him he was not alone." Dennis felt his eyes burning. He remembered those long nights, the hatchling's labored breathing, the fear that it would die despite everything he did. "Rust remembers every moment," Grandmother Ashscale said. "Every kindness. Every word. He remembers the human with gentle hands who asked for nothing in return." Another dragon stepped forward, younger than the others but still massive. Its scales were copper, bright and polished now. It looked down at Dennis and he knew those eyes. He had seen them full of pain and fear. Now they shone with health and life. The young dragon Rust spoke through his own translator device. "You said I was not alone. Because of you, I am here. I would have died in that alley. Instead, I live." Dennis tried to speak, but his voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. "I just did what anyone should do. You needed help." "No," Grandmother Ashscale said firmly. "Most would not have helped. Most would have been afraid or would have thought only of themselves. You chose compassion when no reward was offered. This is rare among all species, human. This is precious." She straightened to her full height, towering over Dennis like a living mountain. "The Copper Fire clan has come to honor a debt. You saved our youngest, our most treasured. There is no greater gift you could have given us." Around the plaza, more dragons emerged from other shuttles. They all bowed toward Dennis. Human witnesses watched in stunned silence as the most feared species in the galaxy showed respect to a janitor who had simply been kind. Grandmother Ashscale gestured with one massive clawed hand. 2 smaller dragons came forward, carrying a wooden box between them. The wood was dark and polished, covered in carvings that seemed to move in the light. They set the box down gently in front of Dennis. "Among my people," Grandmother Ashscale said, "there is one law above all others. A life debt must be honored. You gave us back our child. We cannot repay such a gift, but we can acknowledge it." Dennis looked at the box, then back at the enormous dragon. "I don't want payment. I'm just glad Rust is okay." A sound came from the gathered dragons, a rumbling that Dennis realized was laughter. Not mocking laughter, but something warmer. Almost fond. "This is why we came," Grandmother Ashscale said. "You ask for nothing. Most species, when they learn who we are, demand payment for even small services. They see our wealth and our power and think only of what they can take. You saw a dying child and thought only of easing its pain. Rust stepped closer to Dennis. The young dragon was enormous now, probably weighing several tons, but he moved carefully. When he spoke, his voice was soft. I remember your maintenance room, the flickering light, the smell of cleaning supplies. I remember pain, so much pain I thought I would die from it. The young dragon's eyes glowed brighter. Then you touched me. Your hands were gentle. You talked to me, even though you thought I could not understand. You told me about your wife who left. Your children who do not call. You told me you were lonely. Dennis felt his face flush. He had said those things late at night when he thought the hatchling was too sick to understand. Private thoughts he had never spoken aloud to another person. I understood every word, Rust continued. Dragons learn language while still in the egg. We hear our clan speaking and we know. When you found me, I was in too much pain to respond, but I heard you, every word. The young dragon lowered his head until it was level with Dennis's chest. You said I was not alone, that you would stay with me, and you did. You missed work. You spent money you did not have on food for me. You slept in a chair so you could watch over me. Rust's voice became even softer. You made me feel safe. For the first time since I fell to your world, hurt and terrified, I felt safe, because a stranger decided I mattered. Dennis reached out slowly and touched Rust's scaled face. The dragon closed his eyes and leaned into the touch, just like he had done as a hatchling. You did matter, Dennis said. You do matter. Grandmother Ashscale made a sound deep in her chest. When Dennis looked at her, he could have sworn the ancient dragon's eyes were wet. Open the box, Dennis Cole. Dennis knelt and opened the carved box. Inside, resting on dark velvet, were 3 items. The first was a scale, much larger than the one Rust had left on his pillow. This one was the size of Dennis's hand, silver copper like Grandmother Ashscale herself. It glowed with an inner light. That scale is from my own body, the matriarch said. It marks you as family to the Copperfire clan. Any dragon who sees it will know you are under our protection. To harm you would be to harm us. To help you is to honor us. The second item was a crystal sphere filled with swirling light. When Dennis picked it up, stars appeared inside it. No, not just stars, maps, navigation charts. The location of our clan's primary territory, Grandmother Ashscale explained. We do not share this with outsiders. But you are not an outsider anymore. You are welcome among us always. Bring that sphere to any dragon clan, and they will know you have the right to visit. The third item was simpler, a metal bracelet sized for a human wrist. When Dennis touched it, it warmed under his fingers. A translator device, Russ said, so we can speak directly without delay. I want to talk with you, Dennis. Really talk. I want to know more than just the words you said in those 4 days. I want to know the person who saved me. Dennis picked up the bracelet with shaking hands. He was not a religious man, but this felt like something sacred. These were not just gifts. They were symbols, proof that one small act had mattered more than he could have imagined. I don't understand, Dennis said quietly. I'm nobody. Just a janitor. Why does this mean so much to you? Grandmother Ashscale settled onto the ground, bringing her massive head closer to Dennis's level. Let me tell you about dragons, Dennis Cole. We are old. So very old. We have traveled the stars for thousands of your years. We have seen species rise and fall. We have witnessed great beauty and terrible cruelty. Her copper-silver eyes held his. And in all that time, do you know what we have learned? Power is common. Technology is common. Wealth is common. Every species wants more of these things. They fight for them. They lie and cheat and kill for them. She paused, letting her words sink in. But kindness? True kindness given freely without thought of reward? That is rare, Dennis. That is precious beyond measure. We can count on one hand the number of species we have met who value compassion as much as they value strength. Another dragon spoke up, an older male with bronze scales. Most species fear us because we remember. We remember every slight, every betrayal across generations. What they do not understand is that we also remember every kindness, every act of honor, every moment of genuine compassion. You could have walked away, Grandmother Ashscale said. You had been warned about us. You knew helping Rust might bring you trouble, but you helped anyway because letting him die felt wrong to you. That choice tells us more about humanity than 1,000 diplomatic meetings could. She stood again, her full height commanding. The Copperfire clan declares Dennis Cole to be kin. Our protection is his. Our home is his. Our memory will hold his name for 1,000 generations. Around the plaza, every dragon raised their heads and made a sound together. It was not quite a roar, more like singing, deep and resonant, making the air itself vibrate. Dennis felt it in his bones, in his chest, in his heart. When the sound faded, Grandmother Ashscale spoke again. "We have sent a message to your leaders and to the Galactic Coalition. Let all know that humans are worth knowing. Any species capable of producing individuals like Dennis Cole deserves respect." Dennis looked at the box of gifts in his hands, at Rust's hopeful face, at the dozens of dragons who had come just to thank him. His eyes burned with tears he would not let fall. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Anything," Grandmother Ashscale replied. "Will you visit sometimes? Not the clan, just Rust. I'd like to know how he's doing. Make sure he's staying healthy." Rust made a sound of pure joy. "I will come every week if you allow it. I have so many questions about humans, about you, about everything." Dennis smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes for the first time in years. "I'd like that." The news spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within hours, every species in the Galactic Coalition knew what had happened on Earth. A human janitor had saved a dragon's life. Dragons had come to honor him. They had called humans worth knowing. Dennis watched the news coverage from his apartment that evening. Analysts debated what it meant. Diplomats scrambled to understand the implications. Earth's leaders gave speeches about humanity's compassionate nature, trying to take credit for something they had never encouraged. Dennis turned off the television and looked at the gifts on his coffee table. The massive scale glowed softly in the dim light. The star map sphere showed spinning galaxies. The translator bracelet rested next to his old copper scale, the one Rust had left weeks ago. His phone rang constantly. News organizations wanted interviews. His ex-wife called, suddenly interested in talking. His daughter called 3 times, asking if he was really the janitor from the news. Government officials wanted to meet with him. Everyone wanted a piece of his story. Dennis ignored most of them. He called his daughter back and they talked for 10 minutes about nothing important. She did not ask for money this time. She asked how he was feeling. It was a start. He went back to work the next night. His supervisor did not know what to say. How do you talk to someone who had been honored by dragons? Dennis just put on his uniform and started cleaning. The floors still needed mopping. The trash still needed emptying. Dragons might think he was special, but the work remained the same. Rust came to visit on Saturday, landing in the park near Dennis's apartment. People gathered to watch from a safe distance as the massive dragon carefully made his way to Dennis's building. Rust was too large to fit inside, so they sat in the park together. Dennis brought sandwiches for himself and raw meat for Rust. They talked for hours. Rust wanted to know everything about Earth. Why humans built cities the way they did. What family meant to humans. Why Dennis chose to be a janitor when he could do other work. Dennis tried to explain about paying bills and making choices with limited options and finding dignity in honest work. "You take pride in cleaning," Rust observed, "making things orderly and beautiful even though most people do not notice." Dennis nodded. "Someone has to do it. Might as well be done right." "This is what Grandmother meant," Rust said. "Humans understand that all work has value, that caring for simple things matters. Many species only respect warriors or leaders or scientists. They forget that civilizations need people who simply care about doing their jobs well." The weeks passed. Earth's relationship with the Galactic Coalition transformed. Species that had barely acknowledged humanity suddenly wanted trade agreements. The fact that dragons considered humans worth knowing changed everything. If dragons trusted them, maybe humans were not as primitive as everyone thought. Grandmother Ashscale returned once, 2 months after the first visit. She met with Earth's leaders in a formal ceremony. Dennis was invited but sat in the back, uncomfortable with the attention. Afterward, she found him. "They want to give you medals," she said, sounding amused. "Make you an ambassador. They do not understand that you would hate such things." Dennis smiled. "You get it. I am very old, Dennis Cole. I have seen many types of beings. You are happy pushing your cleaning cart and caring for wounded creatures at your animal shelter. Fame and power would make you miserable." She was right. Dennis had no interest in becoming a public figure. He just wanted his quiet life back. Well, his quiet life plus regular visits from a young dragon who had become his closest friend. 6 months after Rust's rescue, something happened that changed everything again. A hostile species, the Krell Dominion, attacked Earth's colony on Mars. They had been testing humanity, seeing if the new species could defend its territory. 20 warships appeared in orbit around Mars, demanding surrender. Earth's defense fleet scrambled to respond. They were outmatched and everyone knew it. Mars would fall within hours. Then dragons appeared, not just a few. Hundreds of them. Dragon ships materialized around Mars, dwarfing the Krell vessels. Grandmother Ash Scale broadcast a message that went across all frequencies. The humans are under our protection. Leave now or face the consequences. The Krell ships fled without firing a shot. Everyone in the galaxy knew what happened to species that fought dragons. 3 civilizations had been erased from history. The Krell were aggressive but not stupid. Dennis watched the footage from his maintenance room at work. Rust had texted him immediately, making sure he knew that Mars was safe. Dragons did not forget their friends. They protected what they valued. After that, no one threatened human colonies. Earth's expansion into space continued without interference. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson. Hurting humans meant answering to dragons, but life for Dennis stayed mostly the same. He worked his night shifts. He volunteered at the animal shelter. He had dinner with Rust once a week, usually in the park where they could talk without drawing too much attention. The young dragon had become an ambassador himself, teaching his clan about humans while learning from Dennis about simple kindness. 1 year after rescuing Rust, Dennis was cleaning the lobby when a school group came through on a tour. The teacher was pointing out the plaza where the dragons had landed. Right there, she told the children, is where Dennis Cole stood. A regular man with an ordinary job who did something extraordinary. A small girl raised her hand. Is being a janitor bad? The teacher smiled. No, sweetheart. Dennis Cole taught us that every job matters if you do it with care. He taught us that being great is not about having power or money. It's about choosing to be kind even when it's hard. Dennis listened from behind his cleaning cart, unnoticed as always. The teacher had no idea he was standing right there. It made him smile. That evening, Rust landed in the park. Dennis walked over with dinner for them both. The young dragon had grown more over the past year. His copper scales gleamed like polished metal. He would be as large as Grandmother Ash Scale one day. I brought something, Rust said. He carefully opened a pouch on his harness and pulled out a small device. A communicator. So you can reach me anytime across any distance. If you ever need anything, I will come. Dennis took the device. I'm not going to call you for every little thing. I know, Rust said. But I wanted you to have it anyway. You stayed with me when I was dying. You did not leave me alone. I will never leave you alone either. They ate together in comfortable silence. Around them, people walked their dogs and played with their children. Life continued normal and peaceful. A janitor and a dragon sitting in a park sharing a meal. It was not the life Dennis had imagined for himself. It was better. Later that night, back in his apartment, Dennis looked at the wall where he had hung Grandmother Ash Scale's scale. It glowed softly, a reminder that kindness mattered, that even small acts could change the universe. His phone buzzed. A text from his daughter. She was coming to visit next month. Just to see him. No favors needed. Just a visit. Dennis smiled and set his phone down. Tomorrow he would wake up and go to work. He would push his cleaning cart and mop the floors and empty the trash. He would do his job well because it deserved to be done well. And maybe, if he was lucky, Rust would stop by and they would talk about everything and nothing while the stars came out above them. One man's compassion had changed humanity's place among the stars. But for Dennis, the real change was simpler. He was not alone anymore. He had purpose. He had a friend who would cross galaxies to share a meal with him. That was worth more than all the medals and fame in the universe.